The note almost slipped through his fingers before he realized it was there, folded small and careful, pressed into his palm like something fragile and alive. The biker had stopped at the gas station for fuel, nothing more, nothing less, expecting another anonymous stretch of highway under a burning midday sun. Instead, in the blink of a moment, his life tilted. What he read on that scrap of paper made his chest tighten, his jaw lock, and his eyes lift slowly to search for the woman who had dared to hand it to him. He did not know it yet, but within the hour, his entire club would be on the move, and a single mother's quiet desperation would collide with a brotherhood built on loyalty, scars, and second chances. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that strangers can still change lives, take a moment right now to like this video, share it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Only kindness. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. The gas station sat alone on the edge of a long rural highway, its faded sign buzzing softly in the heat, surrounded by fields that stretched endlessly under a wide blue sky. It was the kind of place people passed through without remembering, a stop defined by routine and forgetfulness. That was exactly why Mara Holloway worked there. At 32, she had learned the strange comfort of being invisible. As a single mother, invisibility often felt safer than hope. She worked the day shift because it paid a few cents more and because daylight made her feel like less could go wrong. Her son, Jace, was 7 years old and spent those hours at a small after-school program she could barely afford, his backpack patched twice already, his shoes one size too small. Every shift Mara calculated numbers in her head, rent against groceries, gas against school supplies, medical bills against everything else. The math never worked out, but she kept trying anyway. That day had started like all the others, with exhaustion clinging to her bones and worry sitting heavy behind her ribs. She had barely slept, her mind looping around a letter she'd received that morning from the landlord. Past due, final notice. The words burned in her thoughts as she wiped counters and rang up customers, forcing polite smiles that never quite reached her eyes. She had promised Jace that things would be okay, that somehow they always found a way. But standing there under the humming fluorescent lights, she felt the edges of that promise begin to crack. When the biker rolled in, the sound of his motorcycle cut through the quiet like thunder. Heads turned instinctively. He was broad-shouldered, leather-clad, his bike scarred and well-loved, the kind of man people noticed without meaning to. His name was Rowan Pike, though most people simply called him Pike. Years on the road had etched lines into his face and stories into his posture. He carried himself with the calm of someone who had seen too much chaos to be rattled by small things. To most, he looked intimidating. To those who knew him, he was steady, loyal, and quietly protective of the vulnerable, even if he never advertised it. Mara noticed him immediately, not because of fear, but because something in her gut stirred. She had seen bikers before, plenty of them passing through, but there was something different about the way he moved, careful, deliberate, like he was always watching the world instead of charging through it. She rang him up for fuel and a bottle of water, her hands trembling just slightly as she passed it across the counter. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that brief moment, Mara felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope, not the loud, foolish kind, but a quiet, desperate whisper that said maybe this man would see her. She had no plan, no script, no guarantee. All she had was a folded piece of paper she'd written during her lunch break, the pen shaking in her fingers as she tried to find the right words. Pride had fought her the entire time. Fear had almost won, but when Pike turned to leave, something inside her broke open. She stepped forward before she could stop herself and slipped the note into his hand as she passed him his receipt. Her face burned with embarrassment, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. She didn't wait to see his reaction. She turned back to the register, staring at the counter as if it might swallow her whole. Outside, Pike paused beside his bike. He hadn't expected anything out of the ordinary, but the weight of the paper in his palm stopped him. He unfolded it slowly, the edges worn thin as if it had been folded and unfolded a dozen times already. The handwriting was neat but rushed, each word heavy with restraint. It explained that she was a single mother, that she was about to lose her home, that she had no family left to ask for help. It said she didn't want money handed to her, didn't want charity, only work, protection, a chance to keep her child safe. At the bottom, in smaller letters, was a line that hit him harder than the rest. I don't know why I trusted you. I just did. Pike stood there longer than the engine heat required, the world narrowing around that note. He had seen desperation before, tasted it in his own past when he'd been younger, angrier, one bad decision away from disappearing entirely. He knew what it looked like when someone reached out not because they wanted to, but because they had run out of other choices. He looked back through the glass at Mara, saw the way her shoulders were hunched, the way she pretended to focus on her work while clearly bracing for rejection. Something settled in his chest, heavy and certain. This was not a moment he could ride away from. He mounted his bike and pulled out his phone, the wind tugging at his vest as he dialed a number he rarely used lightly. The club answered quickly, voices layered with curiosity and respect. Pike didn't waste time. He told them where he was, what he'd read, and why he needed them. There was no hesitation on the other end, no questions about why. Loyalty like theirs didn't require explanations. By the time he hung up, engines were already warming miles away. Inside, Mara went through the motions of her shift with a knot in her stomach. She regretted the note almost immediately, shame flooding her veins. Who was she to ask a stranger for help, especially one who looked like trouble to people who didn't know better? She told herself she'd been foolish, desperate, reckless. When her break came, she sat alone in the small back room, staring at her phone, wondering how she would tell Jace that they might have to move again, that stability was something other families had, not them. The sound of motorcycles returned, louder this time, multiplied, rolling in like distant thunder growing closer. Mara froze. Through the window, she saw them pull up one by one, leather vests, chrome gleaming in the sun, men and women dismounting with quiet purpose. Her heart leapt into her throat. Panic surged, followed quickly by fear that she had made a terrible mistake. Customers inside went silent, the air thick with tension. Then Pike stepped through the door, his expression calm, eyes searching until they found her. He didn't speak. He simply nodded once, a small, reassuring gesture that cut through her fear like light through fog. Behind him, the club members spread out, not threatening, not loud, just present. The manager, pale and confused, hovered uncertainly, unsure whether to call for help or offer coffee. Pike moved closer to Mara, holding out the note. He didn't hand it back to shame her. He handed it back like a promise. What followed wasn't dramatic in the way movies portray. There were no raised voices, no violence, no grand speeches. There was only action. One of the club members knew a contractor who needed reliable workers. Another had connections with a legal aid group that specialized in tenant rights. Someone else offered childcare help, another a used car sitting idle in a garage. They listened as Mara explained her situation, her voice shaking at first, then steadying as she realized she was being taken seriously. For the first time in months, she wasn't being rushed or dismissed. She was being heard. Over the next few days, everything began to shift. Not magically, not without effort, but tangibly. Pike checked in regularly, not hovering, just making sure promises were kept. The contractor offered Mara a daytime cleaning job with flexible hours and fair pay. Legal aid stepped in, buying her time with the landlord and negotiating a manageable plan. The club helped repair her old car, refusing payment, insisting only that she pass the kindness on when she could. Jace met the bikers one afternoon, wide-eyed and curious, and instead of fear, he found laughter, gentle teasing, and adults who treated him like he mattered. Mara struggled with gratitude, with the unfamiliar weight of support. She wasn't used to people showing up without expecting something in return. At night, after Jace fell asleep, she would sit at the small kitchen table, exhaustion settling into her muscles, and let herself cry quietly, overwhelmed by relief and disbelief. She knew this help didn't erase all her problems. She still had to work, still had to budget, still had to fight for her future. But the crushing loneliness was gone. In its place was something sturdier. Community. Pike watched all of this from a respectful distance. He didn't see himself as a hero. To him, this was simply what you did when someone asked for help in the only way they knew how. The club wasn't perfect. None of them were. They carried their own past mistakes like scars under leather. But they understood loyalty, and they understood what it meant to be given a second chance when you least expected it. Helping Mara felt like honoring the help some of them had once received. Weeks passed. The gas station no longer felt like a trap to Mara. It felt temporary, a stepping stone instead of a dead end. Her shoulders straightened. Her smiles grew more genuine. Jace started sleeping through the night again, his laughter returning, his drawings filling the fridge. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in gold, Mara realized something quietly profound. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rebuilding. The day she finally moved into a small but clean apartment closer to Jace's school, the club showed up again, not with engines roaring this time, but with boxes, tools, and easy camaraderie. They carried furniture, fixed a leaky faucet, and left behind a stocked pantry without making a show of it. When they left, the apartment felt warmer, fuller, alive with possibility. Mara stood in the doorway long after the last bike disappeared, her heart aching with gratitude she knew she'd carry forever. If this story has touched your heart, if it's reminded you that kindness still exists in unexpected places, take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. That night, after Jace fell asleep in his new room, Mara sat on the floor with her back against the wall, breathing in the quiet. She thought about the note, about the risk she had taken, about how close she had come to saying nothing and losing everything. She understood now that asking for help was not weakness. It was courage. It was trust. It was the first step toward change. Just before this story ends, we have one special request. Please comment below and tell us where you're watching from and whether you believe small acts of kindness can change lives. We read every comment, and your words matter more than you know. Somewhere down the highway, Pike rode beneath the fading light, the road stretching endlessly ahead. He thought about Mara and Jace, about the note that had found its way into his hand at exactly the right moment. He knew there would be other roads, other strangers, other choices. But this one would stay with him, a reminder that even the smallest gesture, a folded piece of paper, a moment of trust, could ripple outward and change lives in ways no one could predict. And in that quiet certainty, beneath the open sky, he smiled, knowing that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply answer when someone asks for help.